Hey guys, my name is Loveless, and we are back with Mollitudo. So at first I was going to do another episode of Quirk Knife, but for whatever reason I did not have the motivation to actually continue and do that. I was reading it and I was like, I'm not in the mood to read this. And then so I went back to this one and was like, ooh, it's getting spicy. I want to read this. So that's exactly how things are going. I'm more likely going to just push on forward and do the Quirk Knife one next week. But right now, I'm just doing whatever I feel like actually recording. So let's get straight into it. It was almost ridiculously fast how they found Vexen's house. Katsuki knew with the wrath of 6 determined students and 2 angry teachers were not to be trifled with, and the result showed in the swiftness at which the house was located. Katsuki had never seen Koda this determined. His voice rushed out steadily as he relayed the information from the rats they were following. He hated owing people, but he was just so fucking grateful for Koda's quirk and how the animals managed to find the house. The house was so normal, it was almost infuriating. Tsukachi, he heard from Aizawa as he briefed them in rushed and hushed tones, had gathered paramedics and police quickly. So quickly that when they reached their general location, they were already on standby. Before they broke in, Aizawa had told them to only use their quirks at his discretion. Katsuki flexed his hand angrily. Stay quiet, Aizawa said curtly. Ida, Kirishima, stay outside as lookouts. They looked reluctant, but didn't protest against the severity of the situation. They watched impatiently as Aizawa picked the lock of the flimsy wooden door. He wanted to just blast down, but the police had decided against it for the fear of startling the kidnapper. Katsuki held his breath as the door opened, pushing slowly by Aizawa. The house was dim and looked empty at first glance. They filled out the living room. Aizawa was impossibly tense, and Katsuki felt his heart thrumming rapidly in tension. Yudaraka looked sick, and sweat ran down her face. Todoroki stoically beside her. They took a precious second to listen out for sounds. Then, muffled due to the distance, they heard it. Without even processing, he recognized the sound. It was Deku, crying out, voice filled with raw terror, as he begged for Vexen to stop. Katsuki could never forget how his heart dropped and how adrenaline had filled his body, mind going blank with rage. Aizawa immediately took off without waiting, his instincts to retrieve and protect leaving him in the dust. Katsuki was right behind him, feeling his face twist in a snarl as his footsteps pounded against the ceramic floor. By the time he'd reached, Aizawa had broken down the door and was already on Vexen, his red eyes as he took down without mercy. Katsuki registered the noises, but his panic gaze was flitting around the room, finally sliding onto Deku. He knew he would never forget this sight. It would forever be etched into his brain. Deku was sobbing on the floor, his eyes wild and unseeing as he wailed. There was so much fucking blood. The room smelt stank and stale. Katsuki heard Yudaraka puke beside him as Todoroki grabbed her. He wanted to walk forward, but he felt rooted to the ground in shock. You're under arrest for kidnapping and torturing of a student, Aizawa snarled, his scarf tightening on the man. Vexen had the fucking guts to laugh. It's too late, teacher. I got what I wanted, he purred. Izuku's been such a good boy. I had fun. The next thing he registered was Vexen's cry of pain as Katsuki's fist landed solidly on his face. The crunch beneath his fist felt satisfying, but it wasn't enough. Bakugo, back off! Aizawa snapped as Vexen giggled. Fucking fucker! Katsuki's fist raised, driven by a single thought, punching him again. But Aizawa knocked Vexen unconscious before Katsuki could. He growled, attempting to throw one in anyway. When he heard Deku's stabs cut off and become terrified gasps, terrified that he was dying, Katsuki whirled around, eyes wild, and saw the paramedics who had rushed in, trying to surround him and grab him with their hands. His hesitation to approach was completely wiped off upon seeing the fear in Deku's hazy eyes, his hands cradling to his chest as he flinched back from all the hands. He ran to him, his name torn from his throat in desperation. Aizawa felt exhausted. He also felt like a failure. He looked at his hands, coated with his kid's blood, before shaking his head and letting the running water wash away the blood, even though he was used to the smell of blood. Knowing that it belonged to one of his students made it so much worse. "Can't be weak now, Aizawa," he thought firmly. He had his other kids to reassure. He walked out of the hospital toilet, meeting the gaze of 5 tired students. They were huddled together, even Bakugo, at the chairs, speaking in hushed tones. After leaving Midoriya in the hands of the medics, the kids had insisted on going to the hospital. Aizawa wanted them to go back to their dorms, but one look at their shaken faces made him keep them around him. He managed to send Koda back, however, calling him paranoid, but his senses were on alert mode. And despite what he looked like, he did care for his students. Bakugo had stood up immediately, his face blank, but the stress lines around his eyes gave it away. "Sensei?" "Bakugo, I'll let you off this one time because you were emotionally involved in the case, but do not punch anyone without my permission again," was the first thing Aizawa said. It was harsh, but he knew it was something Bakugo had to learn. When Todoroki said, "I would have punched him too," Aizawa just sighed. "How's Deku?" Yuraraka asked, her voice panicked. She looked sick again. Kirishima and Ida fidgeted uncomfortably on the hospital waiting chair beside them. "Was it that bad?" Ida said, tone hushed. "There was..." Yuraraka swallowed harshly. "There was a lot of blood." Aizawa wondered if she was remembering the incident involving Night Eye. Bakugo sank back into his chair, staring suddenly at the white walls, arms crossed. Aizawa pondered on what to say. It was a delicate issue involving their friends, after all. He walked closer to them, kneeling in front of Yuraraka and turning his head around to look at everyone steadily. "I'm not going to lie to you and say everything will be okay immediately," was what he decided on. "What I do want you guys to focus on is Midoriya is alive, and we'll work on whatever problems may come after." Ida looked down at his lap. We couldn't do anything, Sensei," he said quietly. "Even though we all insisted on helping." Everyone shifted, their face falling. Bakugo's blank face broke as he frowned. "When I let you guys into the investigation," Aizawa's voice was firm, "I didn't expect you guys to do anything. While you're students in training to be pro heroes, that's what you guys are. Training." They looked unhappy at his answer. And you have helped, Ida, Kirishima. You guys stood as lookout. What if Vexen had escaped? You were there to prevent that." Said students shifted in attention. "Yuraraka, Todoroki, you helped to ensure Midoriya would be able to move safely with maximum comfort." They looked at their hands, faces unreadable. He turned to the most problematic one of all. Even now, Aizawa was still not sure if he could get a proper read on Bakugo's emotions. According to what All Might had told him at the time, at ground beta, Bakugo is emotionally repressed. He has a tendency of keeping all of his thoughts and feelings to himself until it explodes, figuratively. And Bakugo, he kept his voice low. You kept him calm. You helped to calm Midoriya down. You kept him grounded. He would have panicked himself into unconsciousness without you. Bakugo huffed in acknowledgement. He stood back as their fluffy movement at the entrance. He saw a green-haired woman enter the room, her face tight with worried lines as she rushed in, All Might and Tsukashi following closely behind. "Where's my Izuku?" Midoriya's mother said. Her eyes landed on Aizawa, and she walked up to him, Aizawa vaguely wondering if she would slap him. "Miss Midoriya." Aizawa greeted, then bowed. As Midoriya Izuku's teacher, please accept my apology for being unable to keep your son safe. His arms felt tense at his sides. He knew the students must be watching him. He needed Midoriya's mother to know how sorry he was. He must be Aizawa-sensei. Her gentle voice was loud in the waiting room as she nudged Aizawa to look back up. Her smile was gentle as her voice. Izuku told me so much about you. Her eyes watered. I don't blame you. It's not the fault of the school this time, she sniffled. I just needed to know he was okay. As if summoned, the doctor walked out of the operating theater. Everyone stood up, surrounding him as various sounds were made. Midoriya's mother was the clearest. I am Midoriya Izuku's mother. How's my son? The doctor looked at her and said, Do I have permission to speak to everyone around here then? At her nod, he continued. Midoriya's condition is stable. The relief on her face was palpable. But we aren't sure when he's going to wake up. What? Why? Bakugo's chilly voice cut through their unease. Midoriya suffered a huge number of lacerations to his chest. He's lost a lot of blood, but we were able to quickly replace them with a blood transfusion. His knee was also fractured and was inflamed from the strain that they were forced to be in. There were also abrasions on his wrists because of the cuffs I was informed that he was in. Those injuries, with time, would heal with no problem. The problem were his head wounds. He looked at the chart. We did a brain scan on him after operating. Then we found multiple signs of trauma to his head. He was most likely hit on the head more than one time. We just have to wait and see when he'll wake up, since head wounds can be tricky. Midoriya's mother face fell. But he'll wake up, right? Hard to say. But since he was awake and able to talk at the time of the rescue, most likely. The doctor reassured as truthfully as he could. He's been moved to general ward already. You can visit him anytime. She nodded tearfully. Bakugo followed in her footsteps as the doctor left. I'm going to visit. Us too, Itoraka said. No. Aizawa cut in. At their protests, he said, No, go back to the dorms. That means you too, Bakugo. Why? Bakugo yelled angrily. What if Deku wakes up? He stopped, then continued in a softer voice. I promised him I will be there. You heard the doctor. He might take a while to wake up. Go back first. I want you guys to talk to Hound Dog. Calm down first. Attend your classes, then you can visit. Aizawa didn't budge, not even when All Might gave him a loaded glance. You kids had a long night. Listen to me. They shuffled uneasily. Midoriya's mother helped at the moment, placing a hand on Bakugo's shoulder. Katsuki, it's okay. I promise to call you the minute Izuku wakes up, okay? She looked at the rest. Go back first. I know Izuku will appreciate your presence, but he would want you guys to be safe more than anything else. Fuck. Fine, Bakugo snapped. He extended his hand, and she placed her phone gingerly into his palm. He entered his number angrily. Since Bakugo had agreed, the rest of the kids followed. Aizawa called them a cab, and him and All Might watched from the entrance at the hospital as they left. You're too soft on these kids, All Might, Aizawa said after they left. If you had let them stay, they would have broken down from all the stress they went through tonight. All Might gave a small, tired smile. I guess. You are so much better at this than I am, Aizawa. I've been a teacher longer than you, All Might. You suck at being a teacher, Aizawa said bluntly. When All Might winced jokingly, he continued. Besides, I know how close you are to Midoriya. Wanting you to think straight in a situation must be hard, too. He rubbed his eyes, which usually felt drier than usual. I think after this, we should interject a tracking device in all our students. All Might laughed, startled. I know you teachers have school tomorrow, but Tsukachi cut in, an apologetic look on his face when both of the teachers turned their exhausted gaze onto him. We're gonna need to ask Vex a few questions at the police station now. If you guys want to come along, yeah. Aizawa nodded. It's gonna be a long night. Aizawa's gaze slid over to the man sitting at the interrogation table. The man was silent, but the smile on his face never went away. Greasy black hair framed his face, unkempt and long. Vixen jiggled his leg as he placed his hands on the table, looking bored. Every few minutes he would sigh happily, his eyes turning distant like he was recalling something. Knowing that Midoriya was kept in his grasp for so long made Aizawa ill. God knows what happened to the student while they were together. Tsukachi made them sit on opposite sides of the double-walled glass, placing a reassuring hand on their shoulders before going towards the man in the room. Your name is Vexen Agnor, 35 years old, quirk registered as null, correct? Tsukachi said as he settled into the seat in front of the man. Vexen let out a puff of amused breath as he leaned his face on his hands. That's right, detective. He shifted in his seat as he added, You don't have to interrogate me, detective. His voice sounded gleeful. I am more than happy to tell you what I did to Izuku. He was such a good boy. You know that. I'm so satisfied. Aizawa felt All Might twitch angrily beside him. Tsukachi's face remained impassive. The calm man lifted a pen. Let's start off by how you took Izuku Midoriya from the streets. Was it all planned? Ah, the streets. Aizawa felt like wiping that smug grin off his face. Was that what Midoriya had to deal with? He was so beautiful when he fell to my quirk. Did you know? My quirk makes people suffer in pain when they try to use their quirk. Then it's only a matter of time of bringing him back to my place. Tsukachi hummed. What was the purpose of capturing Midoriya? Vexen's eyes were slits as he replied. Can you guess? According to our investigation, you wanted to kidnap Midoriya to see him in pain. Are we correct to say that? Tsukachi indulged. Vexen looked delighted as he nodded rapidly. Very clever. Guessed it completely. I guess this Kachan guy must have guessed it then. Did you know I was sending him messages? He probably told you guys, didn't he? Were you the only person who took Midoriya? I had the opportunity, so I took it. Vex only replied, He was such a strong boy. He didn't cry or scream, even when I was slicing into him with my knives. Tsukachi's fingers twitched. He picked up something. All Might mumbled beside him. Aizawa looked at him, and he clarified. Tsukachi's finger twitches when someone's lying or he's mentally noting down something. You didn't answer the question. Did you work alone? Tsukachi repeated. I attacked him alone, yes, Vexen smiled. Did you know he only started breaking on the day you guys came for him? You heroes and police are so useless. He cried and screamed for me to stop. He giggled. I played with his blood, listened to his screams. The giggles increased in volume as he turned into a full quirkle. I didn't even care that I got arrested. My only regret is that I couldn't break him completely. But we'll see when he wakes up if he'll have me on his mind for the rest of his life. His cuffs clanked against the table. I mean, I'm pretty sure I made a pretty deep impression. Okay, that will be all. Tsukachi looked at the officers in the room as he got up. All Might scrambled to his feet after Tsukachi closed the door behind him. What'd you get? He's not speaking the whole truth. I got a nudge from my quirk whenever he answered my question on whether he did it alone. It wasn't a lie, but I don't think that was the whole truth either. I'm gonna have to continue questioning when I can, but I want to go through some things first. All Might ran a hand through his hair. I see. We're gonna have to ask Midoriya for his side, Tsukachi added hesitantly. And in details. I know, All Might said, his voice small. I just hate the fact that the kid is still in the hospital and it's still not over for him. He didn't even seem to realize the phrasing as he rubbed his eyes like he was trying not to cry. Aizawa kind of gets what he meant. After all, it was hard to get attached to your students when they've been through countless villain attacks with them over the period of a year or so. Midoriya didn't deserve this. He was a hard-working student. I'm sorry. They looked at him, startled, and he realized that he let the apology quietly slip out. Aizawa? You know it's not your fault, All Might whispered. I just feel like we could have done more. Aizawa didn't know why he was revealing so much, but it was so hard to keep a straight face when he was so tired, and he didn't have to keep up appearances. It wasn't even us who got Midoriya out from him. All Might's face dropped. Midoriya has always been a clever boy. He must have tried very hard. Even the other kids did more than we did. Tsukachi slapped them both on the shoulders hard. Stop it, he scolded. It's not easy to work with limited information. Instead of being sorry, praise your kids instead. And we can work with Midoriya. He'll be fine. When they stayed silent, Tsukachi slapped their shoulders again. Understand? They nodded. Yay! It's over. I should have done this sooner, but I didn't because, of course, screaming children. But then also I got caught in a hyper focus of reading AO3. I did pretty much work, sleep, eat, and read. That's all I did. Nothing else for like 4 days. I liked it, but then the ending was terrible. I read something that I shouldn't have. I regret it all the way. It is not worth it. It was worse than seeing a train wreck. I was like, mm-mm. But I will not be putting any of those type of train wrecks on my channel, so nobody got to worry about seeing too much of horror. Like, I like hurt and comfort. But that should be it. So, if you want to see more of this series or any of my other series, you know what to do.